Hey, Doug McKnight here. We're here at the FFF Museum in Livingston, Montana. I'm going to tell you guys a pig pen leech. It's a still water trout pattern that I came up with a few years ago here in Montana, but it'll also catch a lot of different fish: carp, bass, bluegill. It's really an all-purpose fly. So to get started, the hook that we're going to use is just a 2X long, kind of heavy-duty nymph hook. And before I put that guy in the vise, I'm going to put on just a black brass bead. You can also use tungsten if you want an extra heavy version. So we'll just slip that guy on there and get started here. Just going to attach, some medium-duty thread. This is Ultra Thread 140, kind of a medium breaking strength. And just going to give this whole shank a coat of thread and wind back to the barb. One thing that you can do that's handy is take a little bit of Zap-A-Gap and put it right up there like that, and then slide the bead over top of that wet super glue, and that'll just keep that bead from moving back on you while you're fishing. Just a nice little tip to keep that guy from sliding around. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of marabou plumes. I'm using a burnt orange and brown. I like to tie this guy in a variety of different colors, but we're going to tie this kind of a tan version here. That's definitely one of my favorites. So what we're going to do is just clip out just a pretty sparse amount of marabou, and we're going to do the same thing with the brown one. And what you want to look for in marabou for this fly is fibers or a feather that has nice pointy tips like that, as well as a good amount of fluff right there. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And what we're going to do is just kind of put those two colors together, kind of even up the tips right here, and just kind of gather those guys up. And we want this tail to be about as long as the hook shank, or maybe slightly longer is fine too. And what I'm going to do is tie the burnt orange on top with this weighted bead on here. What's going to happen is this fly is going to flip over and ride hook point up. So the top of the hook here is actually going to be the bottom. So tie it in just like that, and wind down the excess there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take some just regular pearl flashabou and cut one strand off like that. And the next thing I'm going to do is tie those right down the sides of the tail on each side. So I'm going to take one strip, tie it down on one side, bend this guy around like that, tie it back, and then trim it to length. So you got one piece of flashabou riding right down the middle of the tail. The next thing I'm going to do is make a dubbing loop. And so you peel off maybe about 10, 12 inches of thread, double it over, and wind back over both arms of the thread so you create a loop right here. Okay? And then we're going to take some dubbing wax and just give that thread a nice coat of wax. And what that's going to do is we're going to take some bunny fur and stick it in there, and that wax is going to keep it from moving around too much as we twist up the dubbing loop. So the next thing I'm going to use is just this is a gold variant rabbit skin, and this is a real nice kind of multicolored tan that really do well on this color in a variety of places. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim off a pretty good clump of fur here, and we're going to trim it pretty close to the hide. Actually as close to the hide as you can. Maybe a wad about like that. And what we're going to do is just kind of open up that loop like that, and then we're going to stick that bunny fur right about in the middle, kind of like that. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this dubbing loop tool. This is called a dubbet tool, and this works really nicely for this pattern amongst other patterns that use a dubbing loop tool for. But we're going to engage this tool just like that. And then what we're going to do time out here. What we're going to do is spread that out. Spread this fur up and down this loop. Try and get it even so there's no big clumps on one side or the other. About like that is pretty good. And so once you get all the fur evened out, just going to take this tool and twist that loop with the bunny fur round and around. You want to get it pretty tight. You know, go around until you feel that you got all the bunny fur and the thread twisted up nice and tight. A good test is if you run your fingers down here through there, that the most of the bunny fur doesn't come out. You kind of end up with something about like that. Move the thread up here to the end of the bead. And then you can either use a rotary vise, or if you don't have a rotary vise, you can just wind it. And every once in a while, maybe pull some of this bunny fur back. And just basically give the hook shank a nice thick coat of this bunny fur loop. Maybe with a couple more extra wraps right up behind that bead. And once you get about to there, you just tie off that loop. Just like that. And then you can disengage the loop tool and trim that excess thread. And then maybe a couple of real tight wraps right behind that bead. And then go ahead and whip finish that guy. A little bit of head cement or zap-a-gap on that exposed thread. And you got yourself a really cool leech pattern that will really do well for trout amongst other things. It could look like a leech, like its name, or a crayfish or a small minnow. The list goes on and on. Give this guy a try. I think you'll like it.